Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to another episode of Policy Hub by Burki Institute of Public Policy at Netsol. As you know, the 5Es framework is a special initiative of the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives formulated in June 2022. It identifies 5 areas of priority to turn around Pakistan. As with any development initiative, there are stumbling blocks or potential bottlenecks, which tend to get eclipsed by hefty promises of prosperity. Therefore, in today's show, we are going to dissect and discuss this framework in detail. And before I could start the discussion, I would introduce my guest, Dr. Suleman Aziz Lodhi. He brings with him multi-organizational and cross-disciplinary research experience. Dr. Lodhi has a Postdoctoral Research Fellowship in Management Sciences from the University of Westminster, London. He has a working experience of more than 25 years in the government, NGO as well as the private sector, starting his career in public health engineering with the World Bank projects on community development in 1995. He later joined Secretariat of a premier trade association, APTABA, and headed its economic research wing. His present activities include international consultancy, applied research in the domains of organizational development, business digitalization, knowledge economy, community development, and social network analysis. He is also the Dean of Management Sciences Department at University of South Asia and associated as a senior consultant at BIPP. So welcome to the show. So first and foremost, could you please describe the 5Es framework for our viewers?
Right. First of all, let me thank you for giving me this chance. It's always a pleasure to be at BIPP. And now coming to the 5E framework, I would start by first discussing the need for that. Why did we need it, E5? If you look at the trade balance of Pakistan, you would see that we are about $40 billion of deficit. That means we are importing more goods than we are exporting from this country. Therefore, the government decided to focus on exports so that we would be able to earn foreign exchange. And for that purpose, this 5E framework was developed. Talking about the 5E, basically it has the number 1E for the exports. That means we wanted to improve the exports from Pakistan, the goods that are produced in Pakistan and later exported to other countries. Secondly, the framework talks about e-government, meaning that we have to digitalize our businesses so that the synchronization between the businesses in Pakistan and rest of the world is improved. Thirdly came the climate change. The E is for environment and climate change, which is an important challenge which is faced by throughout the world from nearly all countries, and Pakistan is in one of the countries that have high risk of the planet. After environment was the energy. The domain about energy is essential. Our energy cost in Pakistan should be comparable to our competitors so that the cost of the goods produced in Pakistan can be sellable around the world. And finally came the equity and employment. That includes that all the public in Pakistan, especially the young people, the women, are given equal opportunity. They are provided better health services, they are provided better education so that they can be part of the larger ecosystem which is producing the economy of the country. That will give you an overall image.
So we've got an understanding of the 5Es framework. Could you also now identify the potential bottlenecks in its implementation?
Right. Well, first of all, we should keep in mind that 5E is a framework. Talking from management perspectives, there are basically 3 layers. In the system, the top is the idea, the framework that defines a larger picture of how things are going to work in any system. But it's an overall and a general picture. Then supporting those frameworks should come the policies of the government. And under the policies are the rules and regulations. Therefore, when we talk about the 5E framework, in isolation, it would not give any output because it is only an idea. So we can say, okay, it's a good story, unless we have policies that are going to support the framework so that it can deliver something. And the actual work is actually done by the rules and regulations that are developed for supporting the policies, and policies are going to interact to form the framework, and the overall ecosystem of any system is going to produce. So therefore, when we talk about a framework in isolation, it will not produce anything. Basically, the main idea is that the economy is basically the result of the systems, the subsystems working in any place. So if the subsystems are working correctly, we will have a good economy. But if the subsystems are not performing, we cannot have a better economy. Another example I would say, for example, is that when we talk about increasing the exports, which is the outcome, we have to talk about our, let's say, energy policy. Do you think our energy policy is going to support our exports? We have to talk about our taxation. Are we giving any special leverage to the industry which is going into export? Therefore, what we have to see is that it is not the framework which has to work in isolation. We have to see that we have appropriate policies that are synchronized. And when they interact, we are able to have a greater output. For example, when we talk about exports and we talk about software exports in 5E framework, unfortunately, our ICT, our internet is not performing well presently. So as a result of that, we should not expect that our software houses would be able to capture international market. Then again, that comes back to we have to ensure that it is not only the framework, but we have the right policies that can give the output.
So what would be your advice to the government in regarding this framework?
Naturally, this framework was a good step by the government. But as we were talking, that a framework alone would not be able to produce any output. Therefore, what the government must do is that firstly, it should ensure that the policies are synchronized with one another. And as a result of that, they are able to support the framework. And talking about synchronization of policies, if you remember, we have worked in this BIPP as a think tank. We were working on management tool that can support the policies. So we have worked with that in different universities also. And if we are able to implement that framework in government planning and development department, we would be able to identify exactly which policies are not synchronizing with other policies. And we would be able to identify the gaps even in the rules, which rules and regulations are missing. And because of those rules and regulations, we are not able to implement the policies. And because of non-implementation of the policies, the framework is not able to work. So basically, we have to see the overall picture and how it is working. And beside that, the second point which the government can focus very strongly and should focus, and that would be to involve the stakeholders in developing policies. During this 5E platform, there were a number of interactions by the government in which they were contacting the industry and academia. A conference was also held in Islamabad. But the point which is missing in the processes of the government is that they do ask for recommendation from Lahore Chamber or other bodies. But again, they are just asking it. They are in fact not implementing it. So it is not just that you ask stakeholders, you have to involve them in the process making so that whatever the policy comes out, that policy is accepted by the stakeholders and that policy is developed according to the needs of that stake system. And only then we would be able to have a implementable policy. Now let's looking at the academia. We have always been saying that academia should be involved in policy making. The reason is that when we have government on one sector and the private sector as another stakeholder, they are basically looking at one another as competitors because government is concerned about increasing the revenues, whereas the private sector is thinking that we should not be giving so much in revenue and we should be earning more. And there is no third party to do a balance between them. But when you involve academia into policy making, what happens is that academia is a third party. It does not have a direct interest with the government. And at the same time, it is not favoring the private sector. They are the people of the country who are working in certain academia, and they have expertise in certain domains. So if we involve them, they would be able to create a balance between these two stakeholders. And as a result of that, we can have a better policy making. And I would again say that BIPP has worked on that also, and especially the science and technology network that BIPP was working. The idea behind that was to involve the stakeholders and synchronize them for making a better system to work in a much better place.
So thank you so much for taking out time for today's episode. I'm sure the audience must have been enlightened by this discussion. Until next time, that is all for today. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.